They didn't hesitate. They didn't soften their voices. They said it as if I meant nothing. And then they added the final blow. You have 10 days to move out of this house. You're nothing but a freeloader. I stood there, frozen, trying to understand how the people who raised me could throw me away so easily. What they didn't know was that I was the one secretly paying the bills. The electricity that kept our home bright, the water that filled our glasses, the groceries that fed us. All of it came from me. I sacrificed quietly, believing that family came first. But that night shattered everything. Their cruel words showed me a truth I had refused to see. Sometimes the people you give everything to are the very ones who will tear you down. This is my story. How I walked away from betrayal. How the truth finally came out. And how I discovered that my worth was never theirs to decide. My name is Sarah, and I am 26 years old. I never thought my own family would betray me the way they did. It all started one evening when I came home from work, tired, but still carrying a bag of groceries I had bought with my own money. I placed the bag on the kitchen table, expecting at least a thank you. Instead, my mother called me into the living room with a serious face. When I walked in, both of my parents were sitting on the couch. My father's arms were crossed, his eyes cold, while my mother's lips were pressed tight. My younger sister, Emily, sat off to the side with a smug smile that made my stomach turn. I already had a bad feeling, but I wasn't ready for what came next. My mother's voice was sharp and cutting. Sarah, you have 10 days to move out of this house. You're nothing but a freeloader. From now on, we'll raise a dog in your place. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt my knees weaken, but I forced myself to stand still. My father gave a quick nod, showing he agreed with every cruel word. Emily leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying my pain. She had always been jealous of me, twisting stories to make me look lazy or useless. I wanted to scream that they were wrong. I wanted to shout that I was the one paying for the electricity, the water, the groceries, even the rent whenever they were short. For months, I had been secretly carrying the weight of the house on my shoulders while pretending I wasn't. I did it because I thought it was the right thing, because I loved my family. But at that moment, none of it mattered. I looked at their faces, cold, blind, and ready to throw me away like trash. And I knew the truth. Nothing I said would change their minds. Emily's poison had already sunk too deep into them, so I stayed quiet. My heart ached, but I forced a small, bitter smile. If they believed I was a freeloader, then I would let them live without me. That night, as I lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to myself, if they want me gone, I'll go. But when I leave, I take my sacrifices with me. Let them see how life feels without me holding everything together. The days after that cruel ultimatum felt heavier than anything I had carried before. My parents walked around the house acting normal, as if they hadn't just told their daughter to leave. Emily, on the other hand, was louder than ever. She made little comments like, better start packing, Sarah. Maybe you can freeload off someone else now. Every word from her mouth was like poison. But I stayed silent. What they didn't know, and what hurt me the most, was the truth I had been hiding for years. I wasn't the freeloader they accused me of being. In fact, I was the one secretly keeping the household afloat. When the electricity bill arrived, I paid it. When the water company sent a notice, I covered it. When groceries were missing from the kitchen, I filled the bags myself and carried them home after work. More than once, when my father didn't have enough for rent, I slipped money into his wallet without a word. I thought I was protecting their pride, saving them from embarrassment. But instead of being thankful, they turned against me. Emily had always made sure to take the credit. She would tell my parents she had helped out or found a way to manage bills when the truth was that not a single dollar came from her. She used her charm, her lies, and her fake concern to win their trust. And I let her, because I thought family meant sacrifice. I remembered one winter night when the heating almost got shut off. My parents were worried sick, whispering about how they couldn't afford it. I quietly walked to the gas company office the next day and paid the whole amount from my own paycheck. That evening, when the heat came back, Emily told my parents she had talked to someone she knew to fix the problem. They hugged her and praised her. I sat in the corner, cold inside, watching the credit go to someone who had done nothing. Now, standing in my room with boxes slowly filling up, I felt both angry and relieved. Angry that my sacrifices had been ignored. Relieved that soon I wouldn't have to hide my struggles anymore. I whispered to myself, they think I'm a burden, but they will soon learn who really carried this family. Each day that passed after their ultimatum felt colder. I no longer looked at my parents the same way. Their faces, once a place of comfort, now reminded me of betrayal. Emily walked around like she had already won, like the house finally belonged to her alone. At night, I lay awake thinking about what to do. A part of me wanted to shout the truth, to throw every receipt and bank statement in their faces. I wanted to scream, without me, this house would have fallen apart years ago. But another part of me knew it would change nothing. They didn't want the truth. They wanted a scapegoat. And I was the easiest one to blame. One evening, as I packed my clothes into an old suitcase, I felt a strange calmness inside me. For the first time in years, I thought about myself. Not my parents' bills, not Emily's lies, just me. I zipped up the bag and whispered, if they think I'm a freeloader, then let them live without me. From now on, not a single dollar of mine will enter this house. The decision was painful, but freeing. I would leave quietly, without begging them to believe me, without trying to prove my worth. I had already given enough. As I stood by the window that night, watching the street lights glow, I made a silent promise. This is the last time I will cry for people who never saw my value. From here on, I walk alone. It didn't take long for the cracks to show after I left. Within just 2 weeks, the house that had once run smoothly began to collapse under the weight of unpaid bills. The electricity was the first to go. Neighbors noticed the house going dark at night while Emily complained loudly to anyone who would listen. She told people the power company had made a mistake, but no one believed her. Everyone in the neighborhood knew she had never worked a steady job. Soon after, the grocery debt piled up. The small shop where we always bought food refused to extend more credit. My mother, who once proudly walked in with her head high, now left the store red-faced and empty-handed. The water company sent warnings, and the landlord came by to demand the rent. My father, who used to act so confident, looked embarrassed as he tried to explain things away. Without me silently filling in the gaps, they had nothing to fall back on. Emily tried to lie her way out, telling my parents she almost had money coming in, but every promise turned into another excuse. The neighbors whispered, the relatives noticed, and slowly the truth began to surface. The daughter they had thrown out was the one who had kept their home standing. From the small room I rented across town, I heard about all of this through a friend who still lived nearby. And though a part of me felt satisfaction, another part simply felt tired. I had already carried their weight for too long. Now they were finally feeling what life was like without me. Starting over was not easy, but it was mine. I rented a small studio apartment on the quieter side of town. The walls were plain, the furniture secondhand, but the air felt different. It was mine to breathe, not borrowed from anyone else. For the first time in years, I could close a door behind me and feel peace instead of tension. At first, I felt scared. The silence was heavy, and sometimes I caught myself reaching for bills I no longer had to pay for my parents. But slowly, that fear turned into freedom. My paycheck, though modest, finally went toward things I needed. I bought my own groceries without hiding them, paid my rent with pride, and even managed to save a little. One evening, my friend Rachel stopped by with takeout boxes in her hands. She had known me since high school and had always been one of the few people who believed in me. As we sat cross-legged on the floor, eating noodles straight from the cartons, she looked at me and said, "Sarah, I've never seen you this calm before. You deserve this. You deserve to live for yourself." Her words made me tear up. But this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief. For so long, I had been drowning in sacrifices no one noticed. Now, I was finally learning what it meant to breathe on my own. I promised myself that night, I will never go back to being the shadow that kept everyone else comfortable. From now on, My life belongs to me. Back at my parents' house, things only grew worse. The unpaid bills stacked higher, and the shame of being cut off from electricity and water spread quickly through the neighborhood. Relatives who once admired my parents now whispered behind their backs. One day, the landlord finally confronted them in front of neighbors. He told them plainly that for years it was me, Sarah, who had been paying the rent whenever they fell short. His words left my parents frozen. My mother tried to argue, but the landlord shook his head and said, "Don't deny it. I saw her hand me the money myself, more than once. Without her, you'd have lost this house long ago." The neighbors nodded, adding their own memories. Some remembered me carrying heavy grocery bags alone after work. Others recalled seeing me walk to the utility office late at night to clear overdue bills. Piece by piece, the truth unraveled. Emily's face burned with shame. She had spent years taking credit for things she never did, and now everyone knew. My parents sat in silence, realizing the daughter they called a freeloader was the one who had carried them all this time. That evening, they tried to call me. My phone lit up with their number, but I let it ring. I didn't block them. I just didn't answer. I didn't owe them explanations. Not anymore. As I sat by the window of my small apartment, the city lights glowing outside, I felt a deep calm settle inside me. The truth had finally spoken for itself. I didn't need to prove anything. A week later, my parents showed up at my apartment. I didn't invite them in. They stood awkwardly in the hallway, faces tired, voices softer than I had ever heard. My mother's eyes were wet as she said, "Sarah, we didn't know. We made a mistake." My father added, "Come back home. Things aren't the same without you." Behind them, Emily stood with her head lowered, no longer smirking. For once, she had nothing to say. I listened quietly, my hand resting on the doorframe. For years, I had dreamed of them recognizing my sacrifices. And now that they finally did, I realized something. Their words didn't heal me. They came too late. I took a deep breath and said, "I carried that house on my shoulders, and you threw me out like I was nothing. You called me a freeloader when I was the one keeping the lights on. I won't go back to being invisible in my own family." Their faces dropped. My words were firm, but my voice was calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was free. I gently closed the door and leaned against it, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. My parents had finally seen the truth, but I no longer needed their approval. As I looked around my little apartment, I realized it was more than just four walls. It was proof that I could survive on my own, that I could build a life without depending on anyone's acceptance. For the first time in years, I smiled and whispered to myself, "I am enough." And with that, my new life truly began, built not on hidden sacrifices, but on my own dignity,